I'm sat next to our coral reef display here at the Horniman Museum in Gardens. Coral reefs are the most biologically diverse habitats in our oceans, and despite covering 0.1% of the ocean floor, an estimated quarter of all marine species live on coral reefs. So they're absolutely jam-packed with life. And it's the corals that build the three-dimensional structure of the reef that allows this explosion of life to occur, because they create all this myriad of environments for different species to live in. Coral reefs are built by corals, an animal that's related to jellyfish and sea anemones. They have this amazing relationship with an algae that lives within the tissue of the coral. And it's a symbiotic relationship. The algae has a nice safe place to live within the coral, and the coral receives about 80% of its food in return from this algae. But this relationship is very delicate and finely balanced. As we're warming the oceans, it disrupts this relationship, and so the algae leaves the coral, and all you see is the white calcium carbonate skeleton through this thin translucent layer of living tissue. And so the whole reef looks white, and that's called coral bleaching. Coral bleaching isn't a new phenomenon. It's happened throughout the whole of evolution of corals. The challenge that we're seeing now through climate change is these bleaching events are becoming more and more frequent. As a result of this bleaching, we're losing reefs around the world. And that's really important, because if we lose the corals themselves, we lose that three-dimensional structure, and therefore all the life that's associated with reduces as well. Now, ways that corals can recover from these bleaching events is through reproduction. A majority of corals reproduce over a few nights of the year, where they're releasing their eggs and sperm into the water, where fertilization occurs, and the next generation of corals develop. Understanding reproduction is really important if we want to understand how reefs can recover in the future from these big climatic events. Over the past 10 years, focusing on coral reproduction, we've run many experiments. Some of those are developing techniques to build more spawning events in a year. Some are about increasing productivity so we can produce more corals. And others are looking at how we can generate stronger corals that can face some of these impacts of climate change. Coral reefs are not just important biologically, they're also important from a human perspective. About 11% of the human population live in coastal areas and rely on coral reefs either directly or indirectly. The challenge is we are losing coral reefs at an alarming rate as a result of climate change. Much of the research that we're doing behind the scenes here is how can we reverse this trend of loss of coral reef habitats in the wild.